The golden figure tore through reality itself above Virtus Prime, his cape billowing like a war banner as he plummeted through layers of purple storm clouds that had opened like a wound in the sky. Billions of farmers looked up from their harvest fields to see something impossible. A man flying without a jump pack, without wings, without any Imperial technology they recognized. His smile remained fixed even as atmospheric friction burned around him, even as his body screamed in pain from wounds that refused to heal. This was All Might, the symbol of peace from another universe entirely, and he was about to learn that peace was a concept this galaxy had forgotten 10,000 years ago. Governor Markham stood on the balcony of his modest administrative center, watching the descending anomaly through magnification lenses. Virtus Prime was a simple world, one that produced grain and livestock for the Imperium's endless war machine. They had no orbital defense platforms, no space marine garrison, nothing but 3 PDF regiments and the Emperor's protection. The figure resolved in his lenses, humanoid, massively muscular, wearing colors that matched no Imperial heraldry or known Xenos configuration. Blue and red with strange yellow accents, and a smile that seemed utterly wrong for someone falling from the upper atmosphere. "My lord," his aide whispered, "the astropaths report disturbances. Something unnatural accompanies this arrival." Markham nodded grimly, his hand moving to the Vox unit on his belt. Before he could activate it, the figure changed trajectory mid-fall, impossibly altering course without thrust or visible propulsion. The being descended toward the central plaza of Markham's capital city, where thousands of farmers had gathered for the harvest festival. Their simple celebration of another successful growing season was about to be interrupted in ways they could never imagine. All Might's feet touched down on ancient flagstones with enough force to crack the stone in a perfect circle around his landing point. Dust billowed outward in a wave. The crowd fell silent, staring at this impossible visitor. He stood roughly 7 feet tall in this form, his body rippling with muscles that seemed carved from marble. His hair defied gravity, standing upward in 2 antenna-like points. But it was his smile that captured their attention most, wide, confident, utterly fearless. He raised one massive fist into the air and his voice boomed across the plaza without any Vox amplification, carrying to every corner of the gathering. "Fear not, citizens. I am here." The words echoed off the simple hab blocks surrounding the plaza. The crowd remained frozen, uncertain whether to flee or kneel or simply gape at this strange arrival. All Might's smile never wavered, though he felt the wrongness of this place settling into his bones. The air tasted of oil and incense and something else, desperation and fear so old it had become part of the atmosphere itself. This wasn't his Earth, wasn't his Japan, wasn't even his universe. But people were people, and they needed protection. That was enough. The sky darkened again, not with storm clouds, but with something worse. Sleek ships descended through the atmosphere, their hulls made of materials that seemed to shift and change color like living skin. Blade-like protrusions extended from their sides. These were not Imperial vessels, and Governor Markham's face went pale as he recognized their configuration. Dark Eldar, raiders from the nightmare city of Kamara. They came to Virtus Prime every few decades, stealing people for their arenas and torture chambers. The last raid had taken 3,000 souls before PDF forces could mount a defense. The raider ships disgorged their cargo, warriors in Baroque armor that curved and flowed like frozen screams. They carried weapons that crackled with dark energy, rifles that fired crystallized toxins. They moved with predatory grace, laughing as they descended on the panicked crowd. Grav chutes slowed their fall, allowing them to land in perfect formation around the plaza's perimeter. Their leader, a tall figure with a horned helmet and a whip that writhed like a living serpent, surveyed the mass of humans with obvious hunger. "Fresh slaves," the Archon Zealoth announced in accented Gothic, his voice carrying unnatural authority. "The markets of Kamara will pay well for agricultural stock. Strong backs, simple minds, perfect for the fighting pits. His warriors began advancing, weapons raised. The crowd broke, screaming, trying to flee down side streets already blocked by more raiders. Parents clutched children. The elderly stumbled and fell. It was chaos born of absolute terror, the kind that came from knowing exactly what horrors awaited those taken by the Dark Eldar. All Might moved. His speed defied belief, crossing 50 meters in less than a second. His fist connected with the nearest raider's chest plate with a sound like thunder. The warrior flew backward, crashing through 3 others and embedding himself in the wall of a storage facility 30 meters away. The impact crater spread like a spiderweb across the reinforced rockcrete. The other raiders turned, shock evident even behind their twisted helmets. Nothing human should possess such strength, such speed. "I said, fear not," All Might's voice rang out again, and now there was iron beneath the cheer. "While I draw breath, no villain will harm the innocent." He moved again, his body a blur of motion. 3 more raiders fell, their weapons clattering uselessly to the flagstones. He caught a blast from a splinter rifle, the poisoned projectile deflecting off his dense musculature and reinforced costume. He picked up a raider and used him as a shield against his companion's fire, then hurled the warrior into a descending raider ship hard enough to dent the hull. Archon Zeleth watched this display with narrowed eyes, his initial surprise giving way to cold calculation. He raised one hand, and his remaining warriors, well-trained professionals of millennia of raiding experience, fell back to defensive positions. They focused their fire on the golden figure, trying to overwhelm him with sheer volume of shots. All Might tanked the barrage, his enhanced body weathering attacks that would reduce normal humans to screaming puddles. But he felt each impact, felt the poison trying to seep through his skin where projectiles found gaps in his costume or grazed exposed areas, felt the dark energy weapons pulling at something deeper than flesh. The civilians used this distraction to flee. All Might noted with satisfaction that Governor Markham's security forces were efficiently evacuating the plaza, guiding people to underground shelters. Good. These people had practice at this, knew the drill from previous raids. That meant he could focus entirely on eliminating the threat. He launched himself at the nearest raider ship, his fist punching through its hull like paper. Secondary explosions rippled across the vessel as he tore through internal systems. The ship listed, its anti-grav drives failing, and began a slow crash toward an empty warehouse district. More ships descended, disgorging reinforcements. The Dark Eldar were committing serious resources to this raid, more than a simple agricultural world should warrant. All Might fought with precision born from decades of hero work, each movement designed to disable without killing when possible, to protect civilians above all else. He shattered weapons, collapsed landing zones, intercepted fire meant for fleeing families. His laughter boomed across the battlefield, not from cruelty but from pure joy of being able to help, to protect, to serve as that symbol of peace his world needed. 10 minutes passed in a blur of combat. All Might stood among the wreckage of 6 raider ships and the broken forms of 40 Dark Eldar warriors. The surviving raiders had retreated to orbit, their losses too severe to justify continued assault. The plaza was devastated, its flagstones cracked and scorched, but the civilian casualties numbered exactly 0. Every single person who had been at the Harvest Festival had escaped to safety. All Might allowed himself a moment of satisfaction, his chest heaving with exertion he hadn't felt in years. Then he coughed. Blood splattered his lips, vivid red against his pale skin. His massive form began to shimmer, steam rising from his body. The transformation that followed made the watching PDF soldiers raise their weapons in alarm. All Might's muscular 7-foot frame collapsed inward like a deflating balloon. His body shrank, muscles withering to reveal a skeletal figure barely 6 feet tall. His face became gaunt, almost skull-like, with sunken eyes and hollow cheeks. Blood continued to drip from the corner of his mouth as he fell to one knee, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The civilians who had been cheering moments before now whispered in horror. "Demon," someone hissed. "Shapeshifter," another voice added. "Warp-spawned abomination." The fear in their voices cut deeper than any Dark Eldar weapon. All Might tried to maintain his smile, tried to reassure them that this was simply the price of his power, the cost of one for all in his damaged body. But they backed away, making signs of the Aquila, prayers to the God Emperor spilling from their lips. PDF forces surrounded him within minutes, laser-guns trained on his weakened form. An officer approached cautiously, his bolt pistol held ready. "Identify yourself, anomaly. By order of Governor Markham and the authority of the immortal Emperor of Mankind, you will submit to examination." His voice carried the clipped authority of someone who had executed mutants and heretics without hesitation. All Might raised his hands slowly, careful not to make any threatening movements. His smile remained, though it cost him dearly to maintain it through the pain radiating from his old wound. "I am All Might," he said, his voice rough and weak compared to his powerful form's booming declarations. "I'm a hero, a teacher. I came here by accident, but I'll help however I can while I'm in your world." The officer's eyes narrowed behind his helmet's optics. A hero. The word seemed to confuse him, as if he'd heard it but couldn't quite remember its meaning. He gestured to his soldiers, who moved forward with mag cuffs designed to restrain even augmented prisoners. They transported him to the Medicae facility in the governor's administrative complex, a simple building by Imperial standards, but clean and well-maintained. Tech priests examined him with scanning equipment that beeped and whirred with displeasure at readings they couldn't interpret. His biology was human but wrong in subtle ways, variations that shouldn't exist according to their extensive databases. The wound in his side, clearly years old, confused them most. It should have killed him. By all medical logic, he should not be standing, should not be breathing, should certainly not have been capable of the combat performance they'd witnessed. Commissar Vestra entered the examination room 6 hours after his capture. She was a tall woman with a face carved from harsh experience, her uniform immaculate despite the chaos of the raid response. A bolt pistol rode her hip and a chainsword hung from her back. Her augmented eye whirred as it focused on All Might, running analysis protocols. She'd executed 3 soldiers for cowardice that very morning and would sleep soundly tonight. In the commissariat, mercy was a luxury the Imperium could not afford. "You destroyed 6 raider vessels and killed or wounded 40 of the enemy," she stated flatly, consulting a data slate. "Civilian casualties, 0. PDF casualties, 0. Collateral damage to infrastructure, minimal." She looked up from the slate, her natural eyes studying him with cold calculation. "These numbers are impossible, even space. Marines operating in urban environments accept civilian casualties as inevitable. Yet you achieved complete civilian protection while engaging a superior force. Explain how." All Might sat up on the examination table despite the Medicae's protests. His skeletal form looked pitifully weak, but his eyes burned with intensity that matched his powerful state. "Because I'm a hero," he said simply. "Heroes save everyone. We don't accept casualties as inevitable. We find another way." His voice strengthened slightly as he spoke, passion overcoming physical weakness. "Every single life matters. Every person deserves protection. That's what it means to be a symbol of peace." Vestra stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she laughed, a sound entirely without humor. "Peace," she repeated, tasting the word like poison. "There is no peace, anomaly. There is only war. Endless, eternal, grinding war against Xenos and traitors and demons that would devour humanity's very soul. We are besieged on all sides, fighting desperately to preserve our species. Peace is a child's fantasy, abandoned along with all the other luxuries mankind cannot afford." "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard," All Might replied quietly. His smile never wavered, but tears gathered in his sunken eyes. "A civilization that's forgotten peace. people who've never known what it's like to feel safe, to trust that tomorrow will be better than today. No wonder everyone I've met here looks exhausted, looks afraid. He coughed again, blood speckling his lips, but continued. But that's exactly why symbols matter. That's why heroes are needed. Not to win every battle, but to show people that something better is possible. Vestra's hand moved to her bolt pistol. Sedition, she said coldly. You speak of changing the imperial system, of weakening faith in the emperor's vision. That is heresy, punishable by death. Her finger found the trigger, safety already disengaged. One shot would end this strange anomaly, would eliminate a potential corruption vector before it could spread. It was her duty, her sacred obligation to the Imperium she'd served for 30 brutal years. Before she could fire, alarms blared throughout the facility. Red warning lights bathed the corridors. The Vox crackled with panicked voices reporting new contacts, multiple raider ships descending across the capital city. But something was different this time. The attacks were coordinated, surgical. They weren't hitting military targets or trying to maximize slave captures. They were hitting specific locations. An orphanage housing children who'd lost parents to previous raids. A medical station treating the elderly and infirm. 3 separate food distribution centers serving the poorest districts. Governor Markham's voice came through Vestra's personal vox, tight with stress. Commissar, the pattern makes no sense. They're expending resources on low-value targets, and they're spacing the attacks, precisely 15 minutes apart. It's as if they're trying to... He paused, realization dawning. Emperor, preserve us. They're trying to draw out the anomaly. They want to study his transformation, to understand his time limit. Vestra turned to find All Might already standing, his skeletal frame somehow radiating determination despite its obvious weakness. How long until I can transform again? He asked the Medici officer. The tech priest consulted his instruments, servitor implants clicking as he processed data. Unknown. Your biology is unprecedented. Based on current recovery rate and assuming standard human metabolic processes, approximately 47 minutes until recommended combat readiness. People are dying now, All Might said. He closed his eyes, focusing inward on the power stored within his core, the legacy passed down through 9 generations of heroes. One for All responded sluggishly, still depleted from his earlier exertions. But it was there, waiting, ready to burn bright one more time, even if it destroyed his body in the process. He opened his eyes and looked at Vestra. I'm going. You can shoot me or you can help me save those people, but either way, I'm going. Commissar Vestra made a decision that would haunt her career for years to come. She lowered her bolt pistol. You're a fool, she said flatly. You'll burn through whatever power you have left, and then you'll be helpless when they spring whatever trap they've prepared. She moved to the door, gesturing for him to follow. But fool or not, you're the Emperor's fool now. I'll provide tactical support and extraction. Try not to die before we can properly interrogate you about your capabilities. They rushed through corridors filled with mobilizing PDF forces, soldiers preparing to deploy to defend the targeted locations. All Might felt One for All stirring within him, gathering strength minute by precious minute. Not enough yet. Not nearly enough for a full transformation, but perhaps enough to make a difference. He thought of his students back home, of young Midoriya who carried the same power, of all the heroes who'd taught him that one person could change everything. As they reached the deployment bay where Chimera transports waited to carry troops into combat, a new broadcast hijacked every Vox channel and hololithic display across the capital. Archon Zeleth's face appeared, his features cruel and refined in equal measure. Behind him, All Might could see cages filled with captured civilians, men and women and children taken in these latest raids. 400 souls at minimum, possibly more. Golden warrior, Zeleth purred, his Gothic perfect but touched with an accent that made each word sound like a threat. You interest me greatly, Such power, such speed, such strength. Yet you weaken, you transform, you bleed. I have studied you these past hours through careful observation. I know your secret now. His smile widened, revealing teeth filed to points. You have approximately 8 minutes of power remaining before your body forces you back to that pathetic skeletal form. And I have targets all across this city. The broadcast shifted to show multiple locations simultaneously. Raiders stood at each site, weapons trained on huddled groups of civilians. You cannot save them all within your time limit, Zeleth continued. So choose, hero. Which lives matter most? The children in the Eastern orphanage, the wounded in the Southern medical facility, the hungry waiting for food in the Western districts, or perhaps the 400 I have already claimed who even now are being loaded into my ships for transport to Komarog. His laughter echoed through every Vox speaker. Show me what your peace looks like when forced to choose between evils. All Might stared at the displays, his mind racing through calculations. 8 minutes in his powerful form, 12 separate locations, 400 already captured, plus perhaps 3,000 more spread across the active target sites. Mathematically impossible to save everyone. Tactically unsound to even attempt it. The commissar beside him was surely about to explain why any rescue attempt was futile, why accepting partial losses was the only rational response. Instead, he felt one for all surge within his core, responding to his absolute determination. His body began to transform, muscles swelling, frame expanding, power radiating outward in visible waves of pressure. He turned to Vestra, and his smile had never been more genuine, more completely certain. Watch closely, Commissar, he said, his voice already deepening toward its powerful register. I'm about to teach this entire world the first lesson of Hero School. His form completed its transformation, golden light seeming to emanate from his very skin. Heroes don't choose between evils. Heroes change the equation entirely. He launched himself through the deployment bay doors before anyone could stop him, his cape streaming behind him like a banner of hope in a galaxy that had forgotten such symbols could exist. All Might became a golden blur across the cityscape, moving faster than human eyes could track. His first target was the orphanage 3 kilometers east, where 32 children huddled behind their caretakers, while 6 dark Eldar warriors prepared webway portal generators for extraction. He arrived in 4 seconds flat, his fist connecting with the lead raider before the Xenos could register his approach. The warrior flew backward through 2 walls, his armor crumpling like parchment. The remaining 5 turned their weapons on him, but All Might was already moving. He grabbed 2 by their heads and slammed them together hard enough to crack their helmets. The other 3 fired crystallized splinter rounds that shattered against his chest where his costume provided coverage, though he felt several graze exposed skin and burn as toxins tried to take hold. Texas smash! His wind pressure punch sent all 3 raiders tumbling through the orphanage's front wall into the street beyond. The entire engagement lasted 11 seconds. He scooped up the smallest child, a girl perhaps 5 years old who stared at him with wide, terrified eyes. Everyone out, quickly, head to the shelters underground. His booming voice carried authority and reassurance in equal measure. The caretakers needed no further encouragement, ushering their charges toward safety while All Might positioned himself between them and any potential counterattack. His internal clock ticked steadily, 7 minutes 49 seconds remaining. The second location was a medical facility 2 kilometers south. He covered the distance in 6 seconds, arriving to find raiders dragging wounded civilians from their beds toward waiting transports. The Medici staff fought back with scalpels and surgical tools, pitiful weapons against warriors who had perfected torture over millennia. All Might crashed through the facility's ceiling, his landing creating a crater in the tiled floor. He moved through the raiders like a hurricane, disabling each with precise strikes that shattered limbs without killing. Part of him registered that these were slavers, torturers, beings who would inflict unimaginable suffering on their captives. But heroes didn't kill when alternatives existed, even in this grim universe. He helped an elderly woman back onto her gurney, her wrinkled face slack with shock. "You're safe now, ma'am. The Emperor protects." The words felt strange on his tongue, invoking a deity he'd never worshipped, but they seemed to comfort her. The Medicus staff stared at him with the same mixture of awe and fear he'd seen earlier. His skeletal form had marked him as something unnatural in their eyes, and now this transformation back only confirmed their suspicions. Demon or savior, they couldn't decide which, but they scrambled to secure their patients as he'd instructed. His clock ticked. 6 minutes 52 seconds remaining. 3 more locations followed in rapid succession. A food distribution center where starving families fought each other for scraps while raiders selected the strongest for slavery. An industrial sector where workers had barricaded themselves inside a forge, buying time with their own bodies as shields. A residential block where families huddled in prayer circles, chanting litanies to the god emperor while Dark Eldar cut through their doors with powered blades. All Might saved them all, his body moving on pure instinct born from a lifetime of heroism. Each victory cost him precious seconds. Each rescue burned through his dwindling time. 5 minutes 12 seconds, 4 minutes 41 seconds, 3 minutes 58 seconds. But he wasn't fast enough. At the Western Food Distribution Center, he arrived to find the raiders already departing through a webway portal, dragging 16 civilians with them. The portal collapsed before he could follow, leaving him staring at empty air while screams echoed in his memory. The remaining civilians, those he'd saved, looked at him with questions he couldn't answer. Why them and not the others? What made those 16 less worthy of rescue? All Might felt the weight of those questions like physical blows, but there was no time to dwell on failure. Not yet. Not while people still needed him. He returned to the governor's administrative complex with 43 seconds remaining on his transformation. Commissar Vestra waited in the tactical command center, surrounded by hololithic displays showing the aftermath of his intervention. The numbers glowed in harsh green light. 11 locations secured, 1 partial success, 0 complete failures. Estimated casualties prevented, 2,800 civilians. Actual casualties, 16 captured, 3 dead from injuries sustained before his arrival. By any Imperial standard, these were miraculous results. By All Might's standards, they were devastating failures. His transformation reversed as he crossed the threshold, his powerful form collapsing inward to reveal his true skeletal state. Blood erupted from his mouth in a coughing fit that left crimson spatters across the command center's floor. Tech priests rushed forward with monitoring equipment, but he waved them away. "The 400 already captured," he gasped between coughs. "Where are they? Can we track the ships?" His sunken eyes fixed on Vestra with desperate intensity. She'd seen that look before in soldiers who refused to accept that some battles couldn't be won. "The raider vessels departed for the webway 14 minutes ago," Vestra replied, her voice professionally neutral. "They're beyond our reach now. Those people are already in Kamara or en route. They're lost." She consulted her data slate, scrolling through casualty reports and resource expenditure calculations. "You saved nearly 3,000 lives today at minimal cost to Imperial infrastructure. The PDF commanders are calling it the most successful anti-raiding operation in Virtus Prime's recorded history. You should be commended." All Might slammed his skeletal fist onto a nearby console hard enough to crack the screen. The violence of the gesture shocked the assembled officers into silence. 416 people, he said, his rough voice shaking with emotion. 416 souls stolen because I wasn't fast enough, wasn't smart enough, didn't see the trap clearly enough. How can you call that success? Bloody tears tracked down his gaunt cheeks, mixing with the blood still dripping from his mouth. Every single one of them had names, had families, had dreams, and now they're gone to a fate I can barely imagine. They were already lost the moment the raiders took them, Vestra stated flatly. She moved closer, her augmented eye whirring as it analyzed his vital signs. You cannot save everyone. No one can. The Imperium loses millions daily to war, famine, disease, and Xenos predation. We endure because we accept these losses and continue fighting. Your emotional attachment to individuals is tactically unsound and strategically dangerous. She gestured to the tactical displays. Look at the data objectively. You achieved an 87% success rate against a prepared enemy with superior mobility and reconnaissance. That's exceptional by any metric. Where I come from, even 1% failure means trying harder next time, All Might replied. He straightened despite the pain radiating through his damaged body, despite the exhaustion that made his bones feel like lead. Heroes don't accept percentages and acceptable losses. Heroes save everyone or die trying. That's what separates us from villains who calculate human lives like currency. His eyes met Vestra's and she found herself unable to look away from the intensity burning in those hollow sockets. You keep talking about what's tactically sound, what's strategically viable, but what about what's right? The question hung in the recycled air of the command center. Governor Markham shifted uncomfortably, unused to such direct challenges to Imperial doctrine. The assembled PDF officers exchanged uncertain glances, their training warring with something the strange warrior's words awakened in them. Vestra's hand drifted to her bolt pistol, not in threat but in unconscious habit. Heresy began with questions like these, with ideas that undermined the careful calculus keeping humanity alive. Before she could formulate a response that wouldn't require her to execute him, new alerts blared across the tactical displays. Multiple raid signatures, same pattern as before, hitting targets across the city. But this time the attacks came faster, harder, more coordinated. 8 locations simultaneously under assault. The orphanage again, its children barely returned to their beds. The medical facility, its staff still treating shock victims from the previous attack. New targets too. A water purification plant serving half the capital. A Prometheum depot. A Yainaz PDF armory. They're escalating, Markham observed, his face pale as he watched casualty projections climb. This isn't typical Dark Eldar behavior. Raids are surgical, designed for maximum slave capture with minimal resource expenditure. This is sustained assault, almost like they're trying to... He paused, understanding dawning. They're trying to exhaust him. Force him to choose again and again until he breaks or burns out completely. All Might was already moving toward the deployment bay, his skeletal legs unsteady but determined. Vestra intercepted him, her hand on his chest, stopping him more through respect than physical force. You can't transform yet. Your power needs time to recover. Going out there in your weakened state accomplishes nothing except adding one more casualty to the count. Her voice remained hard, but something in her eyes suggested genuine concern rather than mere tactical assessment. Let the PDF handle this. They're trained professionals. They can contain the situation until reinforcements arrive from the southern garrisons. How long until those reinforcements arrive? All Might asked, though he already knew the answer from the tactical displays he'd been studying. Vestra's silence confirmed it. 3 hours minimum. Possibly 5 depending on road conditions and whether the raiders targeted the supply routes. 3 hours of civilians dying while he stood helpless, waiting for power that might not return in time to matter. He thought of young Midoriya back home, thought of the lesson he'd taught his successor about what it meant to be a hero. You don't calculate odds or wait for optimal conditions. You move when people need you, consequences be damned. Give me 20 minutes. He said finally, compromise evident in his tone. 20 minutes to recover enough for one more transformation. In that time, prepare your PDF forces for coordinated assault. I'll hit the heaviest concentration of enemies while your troops secure the secondary targets. We can minimize casualties if we work together. He met her eyes and his smile returned despite the blood staining his teeth. Trust me, Commissar. I've been doing this a long time. Vestra studied him for a long moment, her tactical mind warring with instincts honed over decades of service. Everything about him violated Imperial doctrine. His alien nature, his philosophical deviations, his refusal to accept necessary sacrifice. By regulation, she should execute him as a potential corruption vector. Yet the data was undeniable. He'd saved thousands. He fought with precision and power that rivaled Astarte's strike forces. And most dangerous of all, his words resonated with something deep in her psyche that 30 years of commissariat conditioning hadn't quite crushed. 15 minutes, she said finally. Not 20. The longer we wait, the more civilians die while raiders establish defensive positions. I'll coordinate PDF deployment to support your assault vectors, but hear me. Clearly, Anomaly. You will follow my tactical directives. You will not engage targets I designate as trap situations. You will extract when I order extraction. Understood? Her hand remained on her bolt pistol, making clear this was non-negotiable. I won't let you throw your life away on heroic gestures that accomplish nothing but adding your corpse to the casualty count. All Might nodded, accepting the compromise. They moved to the strategic planning table where hololithic representations of the city showed raid locations in pulsing red. Vestra began assigning PDF units to each target, her commands crisp and efficient. All Might watched, impressed despite himself by her tactical acumen. She wasn't just deploying troops randomly. She was creating a web of support, positioning heavy weapons teams to provide covering fire, placing Medicae units at optimal response points, establishing fallback positions and extraction routes. This was someone who'd fought these battles before, who'd learned through brutal experience how to minimize what she considered acceptable losses. The orphanage is a trap, Vestra said, pointing to the eastern district on the display. They hit it first, you responded. They hit it again, drawing you back while simultaneously attacking 7 other locations. Now they're hitting it a third time. They want you there specifically. I'm designating it off-limits. She highlighted the location in yellow, marking it as a no-engage zone. PDF forces will handle evacuation while you focus on targets where your unique capabilities provide maximum force multiplication. Children are dying there, All Might protested, his skeletal hands gripping the table's edge. I can't just abandon them because it's tactically inconvenient. The wood groaned under his grip, splinters appearing despite his weakened state. Every child matters. Every life has value. You can't ask me to calculate which lives are worth saving based on strategic efficiency. I can and I am, Vestra replied coldly. Because if you walk into that trap, you'll die or be captured. And then how many die in the next raid when you're not here to stop it? How many die tomorrow, next week, next month? She leaned across the table, her augmented eye whirring as it focused on his gaunt face. Your philosophy is beautiful, Anomaly. It's pure and noble and everything this dark universe isn't. But beauty doesn't stop splinter rifles. Nobility doesn't evacuate civilians. Results matter, not intentions. The argument was interrupted by a junior officer rushing into the command center, his face flushed with exertion. Commissar, we've received a transmission from the Raider flagship, audio only. They're demanding we relay it to the Anomaly immediately. He handed Vestra a data slate, his hands shaking slightly. Ma'am, you need to hear this. Archon Zeleth's voice filled the command center, smooth as poisoned wine. Golden Warrior, you disappoint me. 8 attacks and you cower in your fortress, letting lesser beings fight in your place. Have you already learned the Imperial way? Sacrificing pawns to preserve more valuable pieces? His laughter carried genuine amusement. I offer you a choice, since you seem to value such things. Come to the orphanage alone within 10 minutes, and I'll release all 400 captives currently aboard my ships. Refuse, and they begin their journey to Kamarag, where homunculi await, with instruments of exquisite agony. The children at the orphanage will make fine bonus acquisitions either way. The transmission ended, leaving silence in its wake. All Might didn't need to see the tactical displays to know this was an obvious trap. Zeleth wanted to study his powers, understand his limitations, perhaps capture him for the Dark Eldar's flesh laboratories. Walking into that trap alone would be suicide, but 400 lives hung in the balance, plus 32 children currently besieged. The math was simple, even if the solution wasn't. "No," Vestra said before he could speak. "You're not considering this. It's blatant manipulation. An appeal to the exact emotional weakness he's been exploiting all day." She grabbed his skeletal arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "He's lying. Even if you surrender, he'll take you and keep the captives. Dark Eldar don't honor bargains with lesser species. They'll torture you for information about your powers, then use that knowledge to hunt others like you across the galaxy." "There aren't others like me in this galaxy," All Might replied quietly. His internal clock was counting down. 8 minutes until minimum transformation capability, 15 until optimal fighting condition. 8 minutes too long for the children in that orphanage. "I'm unique here, an anomaly as you keep calling me. Which means the intelligence they'd gain from studying me has limited application." He gently removed her hand from his arm, his hollow eyes meeting hers with absolute certainty. "But those 400 people aren't unique. They're farmers and workers and parents and children. They deserve the chance I can give them." "You'll die," Vestra stated flatly. "Or worse, you'll be captured and turned into a weapon against the Imperium. One psycho-conditioning session in a homunculus laboratory and you'll be slaughtering Imperial citizens with the same enthusiasm you currently save them." Her voice rose, frustration breaking through her professional composure. "Why can't you understand that your individual sacrifice, however noble, means nothing if it enables greater harm?" All Might smiled, and for the first time since arriving in this grim universe, his expression carried genuine joy despite the horror surrounding him. "Because that's not how heroes think, Commissar. We don't calculate future hypotheticals to justify present inaction. We don't sacrifice others to preserve ourselves. We stand between the innocent and danger always, even when it costs everything." He moved toward the deployment bay, his skeletal form somehow radiating more determination than his powerful state had. "I'm going. You can support me or shoot me, but either way I'm going." Governor Markham stepped forward, surprising everyone, including himself. "Commissar Vestra, I'm issuing direct orders as planetary governor. You will provide whatever support the anomaly requires for this mission. If the Inquisition questions my decision, I'll face those consequences." His voice shook but held firm. "That thing saved 3,000 of my citizens today. The least we can do is give him a chance to save 400 more." Vestra's jaw clenched, decades of training warring with something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. She'd executed governors for lesser deviations from Imperial doctrine. She'd led firing squads against soldiers who'd shown mercy to Xenos. She was the Imperium's will made flesh, uncompromising and absolute. Yet watching this skeletal warrior prepare to sacrifice himself for people he'd never met, people who feared him as much as they needed him, something in her carefully constructed worldview began to crack. 5 minutes, she said finally, her voice rough. "I'll give you 5 minutes to attempt your rescue before I bring in heavy artillery and level that entire sector. That's the best compromise I can offer between your suicidal heroism and my responsibility to Imperial security." She turned to her tactical officers, her commands coming rapid fire. "Deploy PDF units in a perimeter around the orphanage. Basilisk artillery pieces positioned at coordinates I'm transmitting now. Valkyrie gunships on standby for immediate extraction. Medici teams ready to receive mass casualties. Sniper teams with hellguns targeting any Dark Eldar command elements. Move!" All Might felt, one for all stirring within his core, responding to his desperate need faster than his body's normal recovery cycle should allow. Perhaps it was this universe's different physical laws, or perhaps the power itself recognized the stakes. Either way, he felt strength returning to his skeletal limbs, muscles beginning to swell back toward their powerful state. Not full power, maybe 60% at best, but enough. It would have to be enough. A small squad of PDF veterans approached him in the deployment bay, their lasguns held at parade rest. Their sergeant, a grizzled woman with 3 service studs implanted in her forehead, saluted crisply. "Sir, we volunteer to accompany you. We heard what you did today. Heard you saved everyone you could reach. That's not something we see often in the PDF." Her voice carried conviction that transcended mere duty. "We've lost people to these raiders before, friends, family. If you're going to make them pay, we want to be there." All Might looked at these volunteers, seeing echoes of heroes from his own world in their faces. People willing to stand against overwhelming darkness not because they calculated favorable odds, but because standing was the right thing to do. "I'd be honored to have you with me," he said, his voice strengthening as his transformation approached readiness. "But I need you to promise me something. You focus on evacuating civilians. Get those children to safety, then the 400 if we can free them. Leave the fighting to me." The sergeant grinned, the expression transforming her scarred face. "Sir, respectfully, that's not how the PDF operates. We don't hide while others fight our battles, but we'll prioritize civilian extraction as ordered." She turned to her squad. "You heard him. Evacuation protocols take priority over engagement unless civilians are in immediate danger. We clear?" "Sir, yes, sir." The response came in unified precision. Commissar Vestra entered the bay carrying something unexpected, a Vox bead communicator small enough to fit in his ear. "Take this," she ordered, handing it to him. "It's a direct channel to my tactical command. I'll feed you real-time intelligence on enemy positions and civilian locations. And anomaly?" She paused, struggling with words that didn't come naturally to someone trained in absolute authority. "If you're determined to die heroically, at least die accomplishing something. Make those 400 lives worth the cost." All Might placed the Vox bead carefully, feeling the unfamiliar technology settle into his ear canal. "I don't plan on dying today, Commissar. I have students back home counting on me to return. I have lessons still to teach." His smile widened as his transformation neared completion. "But if dying is what it takes to save everyone, then I'll die smiling. Because that's what it means to be a hero. That's what it means to be a symbol of peace." His body exploded outward into its powerful form, muscles swelling, frame expanding, power radiating in visible waves. The transformation completed in 3 seconds, leaving him standing at full height and glory despite having only 60% of his normal strength available. It would have to be enough. He looked at the volunteers, at Vestra watching from the command center entrance, at Governor Markham, who'd risked everything to give him this chance. "Plus ultra," he said, speaking words these people couldn't understand but would remember. "It means go beyond. Beyond your limits, beyond what's possible, beyond what anyone thinks can be done." He launched himself through the deployment bay doors into the night sky of Virtus Prime. "Watch closely, Commissar. I'm about to teach you what going beyond really means." Behind him, Commissar Vestra stood frozen in the doorway, her hand no longer resting on her bolt pistol. For the first time in 30 years of service, she found herself hoping rather than calculating. Hoping that impossible heroism might triumph over brutal reality. Hoping that one person's absolute conviction could change an equation the Imperium had accepted as unchangeable. In the sky above the orphanage, Archon Zeleth watched his tactical displays with hungry anticipation, waiting for the Golden Warrior to arrive so the real experiment could begin. All Might descended on the orphanage like a meteor wrapped in golden light, his cape streaming behind him as he crashed through the building's reinforced roof. The Dark Eldar had been expecting him, their positions prepared with overlapping fields of fire and webway portal generators positioned for rapid extraction. What they hadn't expected was his tactical approach. Instead of landing in the central courtyard where their trap was most concentrated, he came through the ceiling of the children's dormitory, placing himself between the captives and their captors before the raiders could react. The dormitory erupted into chaos. 32 children screamed as debris rained down from the impact crater. All Might moved with precision born from decades of rescue operations, his massive hands gentle despite their tremendous strength, as he scooped up the nearest children and deposited them behind his body. "Stay behind me," his voice boomed with absolute authority. "I am here, and that means you're safe now." The children clung to each other, their terror gradually giving way to confused hope as they processed the golden giant who'd literally fallen from the sky to protect them. 6 dark Eldar warriors burst through the dormitory doors, their splinter rifles raised and crackling with poisoned ammunition. All Might didn't give them time to fire. He crossed the 20-meter distance in less than a second, his fist connecting with the lead warrior's chest plate hard enough to send the Xenos flying backward through 2 walls. The remaining 5 scattered, their enhanced reflexes allowing them to evade his initial assault. They were professionals, veterans of countless raids, and they adapted quickly to his overwhelming speed and strength. One raider fired a blast net designed to entangle even large prey. All Might caught the weighted mesh with one hand and used it to yank the warrior forward, then slammed him into the floor hard enough to crack the rockcrete. Another fired a shard carbine, unleashing a spray of razor-sharp crystal fragments. The projectiles struck his body, most deflecting off his dense musculature and reinforced costume, though several found exposed skin and he felt the familiar burn of toxins trying to penetrate his system. He grabbed the weapon's barrel and crushed it like paper, then delivered a punch that sent the warrior spinning into unconsciousness. The vox bead in his ear crackled to life. "Central dormitory secured," Commissar Vestra's voice reported. "PDF forces are breaching from the western entrance. Civilian extraction teams moving to your position. Enemy force estimate, 43 raiders total, with primary concentration in the eastern courtyard. That's where the captives are being held." Her voice carried grudging respect. "Your entrance disrupted their positioning. They're reorganizing now. You have approximately 90 seconds before they establish coherent defensive lines." All Might didn't waste those seconds. He moved through the orphanage like a hurricane, each room he entered becoming a brief battlefield that ended with dark Eldar warriors disabled and children hustled toward the PDF extraction teams. His power burned steadily, that 60% capacity holding strong but not growing. He could feel the strain in his damaged side, the old wound from his battle with All for One protesting this sustained exertion. Blood was already seeping through his costume, a dark stain spreading across the blue fabric. But children needed him, and pain was just another obstacle to overcome. The eastern courtyard opened before him like an arena designed for his execution. Archon Zeleth stood at its center, surrounded by 20 of his finest warriors arranged in precise defensive formation. Behind them, portable webway generators shimmered with otherworldly light, and through those portals All Might could see them. 400 Imperial citizens shackled and bound, their faces hollow with despair. The captives were already being pulled toward the portals, disappearing into whatever nightmare awaited in Kamara. "Magnificent entrance," Zeleth called out, his voice carrying genuine appreciation. "You move like poetry, Golden Warrior, like violence made beautiful. But I see your weakness now." He gestured to his warriors, and they opened fire in perfect synchronization. 20 splinter rifles discharged simultaneously, filling the air with thousands of poisoned crystal shards. All Might raised his arms to protect his face, tanking the barrage. The projectiles struck like angry insects, most deflecting off his costume and dense muscle, but many finding exposed areas. Each impact burned as toxins tried to penetrate his enhanced physiology. He pushed through the storm of fire, each step carrying him closer to the Archon. But something was wrong. The poison was affecting him more than it should. his enhanced body usually more resistant to most toxins. These crystals had been specifically tailored. Zeleth had studied his biology during their previous encounters and adapted. All Might felt his muscles beginning to slow, his reflexes dulling by crucial microseconds. The Archon had prepared for him in ways that went beyond simple tactical positioning. "You're wondering why the poison works," Zeleth observed, circling like a predator studying wounded prey. "Your body chemistry is fascinating, Golden One. Similar to baseline human, but enhanced in ways I've never encountered. The toxins I've prepared are designed to target those specific enhancements. Each crystal contains compounds that attack your cellular structure at its most fundamental level." He smiled, the expression carrying no warmth whatsoever. "You're dying already. The question is whether you'll live long enough to matter." All Might spat blood onto the courtyard's flagstones. His vision was beginning to blur at the edges, but his determination never wavered. "I don't need to live long," he replied, his voice still, carrying that trademark confidence. "I just need to live long enough to save everyone here." He launched himself at the nearest warrior, his speed still formidable despite the poison. His fist connected and the raider crumpled, but All Might felt the cost. His movements were becoming predictable, his legendary speed reduced to merely superhuman levels. The Dark Eldar pressed their advantage with professional precision. They fought as a unit, each warrior covering another's blind spots, creating overlapping fields of fire that forced All Might to constantly defend. He couldn't reach them all simultaneously, couldn't disable them faster than they could reposition. For the first time since arriving in this universe, he was genuinely outmatched tactically. These weren't thugs or mindless monsters. These were warriors who'd perfected their craft over centuries, and they'd specifically prepared to counter his capabilities. Through the vox bead, he heard Vestra's voice tight with tension. "Your vital signs are dropping. Whatever they're using is affecting your respiratory and circulatory systems. You need to extract now. I'm sending in the PDF to cover your withdrawal." Her voice carried something unfamiliar, concern. Not tactical assessment of losing a valuable asset, but genuine worry for another person's well-being. "You've saved the children, that's enough. Let the captives go. We can't win every battle." "Not while I'm still standing," All Might replied through gritted teeth. He caught another blast net and used it to yank 3 warriors close enough to strike, disabling them with precision blows, but the effort cost him dearly. Fresh blood erupting from his mouth as his old wound tore wider. 15 warriors remained active, their positions perfectly maintained to prevent him from reaching the webway portals and the captives beyond. Time was running out on multiple fronts. His transformation timer, his body's ability to resist the poison, and most importantly, the captives were nearly through the portals. Then the PDF veterans he'd met in the deployment bay burst into the courtyard, their lasguns firing in disciplined volleys. The sergeant's voice carried across the chaos. "Sir, we're here to even the odds." Her squad moved with practiced coordination, not trying to match the Dark Eldar in close combat, but providing covering fire that disrupted the raiders' perfect positioning. It wasn't much, but it was enough to create openings. All Might seized those openings with desperate efficiency. He moved through the disrupted formation, each strike calculated to disable rather than kill, but delivered with enough force to ensure the raiders stayed down. One warrior tried to impale him with a power lance, the weapon crackling with dark energy. He caught the lance shaft, yanked the warrior off balance, and delivered a palm strike that sent the Xenos tumbling away unconscious. Another warrior activated a husk blade, the weapon designed to drain life essence, with each cut. All Might dodged the first slash by millimeters, feeling the blade's hungry pull even without contact, then grabbed the warrior's wrist and squeezed until bones cracked and the weapon clattered to the ground. But the poison was winning. All Might could feel his transformation beginning to fail ahead of schedule, his powerful form starting to shimmer as his body's reserves depleted faster than normal. He had maybe 90 seconds before forced reversion to his skeletal state. 90 seconds to save 400 people who were almost completely through the webway portals. The math was impossible, the odds insurmountable. Every rational calculation said he should retreat, accept the partial victory of saving the children, live to fight another day. Heroes don't calculate odds, they change them. All Might drew on reserves he didn't know he possessed, one for all, responding to his absolute determination with a surge of power that pushed his transformation beyond its normal limits. His muscles swelled larger, his aura blazing so brightly that the Dark Eldar had to shield their eyes. He moved faster than he'd moved all day, faster than should be possible at 60% capacity. His fists became blurs as he tore through the remaining warriors, each impact creating shockwaves that rattled the courtyard's walls. Archon Zelith watched his perfect trap disintegrate with growing fury. "Impossible!" he snarled, drawing his own weapons, a pair of husk blades that seemed to drink the light around them. "You should be dying. The poison alone should have incapacitated you minutes ago." He launched himself at All Might with speed that rivaled the hero's own, his blades seeking arterial targets with surgical precision. All Might caught both blades between his palms, feeling them bite into his flesh despite his incredible durability. The weapon's life-draining properties pulled at his essence, trying to siphon his very vitality. But he held firm, his smile never wavering even as blood ran down his forearms. "You want to know my secret?" he asked, his voice carrying across the courtyard despite the agony screaming through his body. "It's not my power. It's not my speed or strength. It's this. I never give up. Never. Not while people need me." He twisted his hands, shattering both husk blades simultaneously. The weapon's destruction released a pulse of dark energy that sent both combatants flying backward. All Might crashed through a courtyard wall but was back on his feet instantly, his body now visibly deteriorating as the poison and overexertion took their toll. His transformation was failing, steam rising from his body as his powerful form struggled to maintain cohesion. 60 seconds until forced reversion, maybe less. The PDF sergeant reached the webway portals, her squad laying down suppressing fire against the few remaining Dark Eldar trying to pull the captives through. "Sir, we can't shut down these portals. The technology is beyond anything. We understand." Her voice carried frustration born from watching hundreds of civilians disappearing into alien corridors. "We've freed maybe 50, but the rest are too far through. We need more time." Time was the one resource All Might didn't have. His vision was tunneling, his breathing coming in ragged gasps, and his transformation was seconds from catastrophic failure. The captives were 90% through the portals, their shackled forms vanishing into the otherworldly light. In moments, they'd be beyond reach, lost to horrors he could barely imagine. Every rational voice in his head screamed that he'd done enough, saved enough, pushed far enough beyond human limits. But All Might had never been rational about saving people. He ran toward the webway portals, his deteriorating body protesting every step. Archon Zelith, bleeding from multiple wounds but still combat-capable, moved to intercept. They collided in the center of the courtyard, trading blows that would have killed normal humans instantly. Zelith's claws raked across All Might's chest, tearing through costume and flesh. All Might's fist connected with the Archon's jaw, cracking the ornate helmet and sending the Xenos spinning away. "You die here, golden fool," Zelith promised, his voice distorted through his damaged helmet. "Even if you reach the portals, you cannot follow through. The webway will tear your alien physiology apart. You cannot save them. Accept this truth and die with dignity rather than in futile failure." His words carried terrible certainty, the confidence of someone who'd waged this kind of warfare for centuries against every type of opponent. All Might's transformation failed. His powerful form collapsed inward violently, his body reverting to its skeletal state in a cascade of steam and blood. He fell to his knees, coughing up crimson that pooled on the flagstones beneath him. Through his fading vision, he could see the last of the captives disappearing through the portals. The PDF sergeant and her squad were pulling back, their ammunition depleted and their mission parameters exceeded. The children were safe in Imperial custody. By any objective measure, this was already a victory worth celebrating. But 400 people were still disappearing into nightmares. All Might's skeletal hand pressed against the courtyard stones, his blood mixing with the dust and debris. He thought of his students back home, of young Midoriya who carried One for All's legacy forward. He thought of every lesson he'd ever taught about heroism, about never giving up, about the responsibility that came with power. What kind of symbol of peace would he be if he accepted failure while still drawing breath? What kind of teacher could he call himself if he didn't practice what he preached? One for All stirred within his core, responding to his absolute refusal to quit. Not with another transformation, his body was too damaged for that, but with something else. The power that had been passed down through 9 generations began to resonate, each predecessor's will adding to his own. He felt their presence, felt their determination flowing through him like lightning through a conductor. They had all faced impossible odds. They had all pushed beyond human limits, and they had all refused to abandon people in need. All Might rose to his feet in his skeletal form, blood dripping from his mouth, his body swaying with exhaustion. But his eyes burned with determination that transcended physical capability. He took one step toward the webway portals, then another. Archon Zeleth laughed, the sound mixing disbelief with condescension. "You can barely stand. What do you think you can accomplish in that pathetic state?" "Everything," All Might replied simply. His skeletal hand reached out, touching the edge of the nearest webway portal generator. The Drukhari technology hummed and pulsed, its stabilized field holding the dimensional breach open. The alien energy burned his flesh where the field's edge met his hand, reality itself straining against his presence in this threshold space. But he pushed through, his will overcoming physical limitations through sheer determination. "Because I'm here, and that means no one gets left behind." The webway energies swirled around him within the stabilized portal corridor, dark and hungry but contained by Xenos engineering. Through his vox bead, he heard Commissar Vestra's voice screaming orders, heard the PDF sergeant calling for immediate medici support, heard Governor Markham ordering full artillery bombardment of the orphanage, all of them trying to save him, trying to prevent him from making what they saw as a suicidal gesture. But their voices faded as he pushed deeper into the portal transit tunnel, chasing after the captives who were almost beyond reach. The space was unlike anything from his reality. Not the raw chaos of the warp, but an engineered corridor carved through dimensional barriers, its walls shimmering with alien geometries that hurt to perceive. His body screamed in protest, every cell rejecting this environment, even with the Drukhari stabilization fields providing minimal protection. But he could see them ahead. 400 bound civilians being dragged deeper into the transit corridor by automated systems the Dark Eldar had left behind. Their faces were masks of terror and resignation, accepting their doom because no rescue was possible from this place. All Might's skeletal hand grabbed the nearest captive's chains. The metal was cold in ways that had nothing to do with temperature. Cold like the void between stars, like the absence of hope. These chains were anchored to mechanical rigs the Drukhari had installed at the portal threshold, automated extraction equipment designed to process captives efficiently. He pulled, his muscles straining despite his weakened state. The chains resisted, locked into mechanical systems designed to be unbreakable. He pulled harder, feeling something tear in his side, feeling his old wound open completely. Blood poured from his mouth, but he kept pulling. The chain snapped, its anchor point tearing free from the Drukhari rig. One captive freed, 399 to go. The portal energies were pulling at him, the dimensional corridor trying to draw him deeper toward Kamara beyond. His vision was failing, his breath coming in gasps that brought more blood than air. By every physical law, he should be dead already, should have collapsed when his transformation failed. But heroism wasn't about what should be possible. It was about what must be done. He grabbed another chain attached to another anchor point, pulled, felt it snap, grabbed another, pulled, felt his body breaking further with each effort. The captives he freed stared at him with incomprehension, unable to process that this skeletal dying figure was their salvation. Some tried to help him, tried to break other chains or pull at anchor points, but their human strength meant nothing against the Drukhari extraction technology. Only his ridiculous, impossible, one-for-all enhanced strength could accomplish this task. 20 captives freed, then 50, then 100. All Might's body was shutting down systematically, his organs failing one after another under the combined stress of poison, overexertion, and exposure to the dimensional corridor's energies. His vision had narrowed to a tunnel showing only the chains he needed to break, the anchor points he needed to tear free. His hearing had faded except for his own labored breathing. But his hands kept moving, kept grabbing, kept pulling. Each chain that snapped was another life saved, another anchor torn from its rig. Each person freed was another reason to take one more breath, make one more effort. 200 freed. His skeletal legs could no longer support him. He worked from his knees now, his blood painting the impossible geometry of the corridor around him. The freed captives were trying to pull him back toward the portal entrance, trying to save their savior, but he shook them off. Not yet. Not while chains remained. Not while people needed him. 300 freed. All Might's vision went dark completely, his body having finally exceeded every possible limit. But he didn't need sight for this. He could feel the chains, feel each captive's presence, feel the anchor points that held them. His hands moved by instinct alone, guided by a will that refused to acknowledge physical impossibility. One for all burned within him like a dying star, brilliant and terrible, consuming what remained of his life force to give him these final moments of strength. 350 freed. He couldn't feel his body anymore, couldn't tell if he was still breathing or if his heart still beat. He existed as pure will wearing a flesh puppet that should have died minutes ago. The webway corridor itself seemed to recoil from his presence, this thing that refused to accept the logical conclusion of its own destruction. The Drukhari automated systems tried to pull the remaining captives faster, tried to salvage something from this disaster, but All Might's hands were faster, tearing through anchor points and extraction rigs with methodical precision. 390 freed. 10 remained. All Might's consciousness was fragmenting, pieces of his awareness scattering like stars going dark. But he held on to purpose, held on to the simple equation that had defined his entire heroic career. People need saving, therefore I saved them. It didn't matter that his body was dead or dying. It didn't matter that he'd pushed so far beyond human limits that no medical science could explain his continued function. It mattered only that 10 chains remained, 10 anchor points still held captives, 10 people still needed him. 395. 5 captives left. All Might felt something in his core give way, some final support structure that had been holding his dying body together. He was operating on borrowed seconds now, his continued existence a defiance of natural law. But 5 chains remained, 5 anchor points waiting to be torn free. 5 people still depended on him. He grabbed the next chain, pulled with strength he no longer possessed, felt the anchor rig tear free from the corridor wall. 4 chains, 3 chains, 2 chains, 1 chain. All Might's skeletal hand closed on the final chain, the last captive looking at him with tears streaming down her face. She was young, maybe 20, her PDF uniform marking her as one of the soldiers who'd been captured in the initial raids. "Please," she whispered, though he could no longer hear. "Please don't die for me, I'm not worth it." "Every life is worth it." That's what heroes understand that others don't. He pulled. The chain resisted, this final anchor somehow stronger than all the others, its rig reinforced with additional Drukhari engineering. He pulled harder, feeling what remained of his body coming apart at a cellular level. The portal energies were consuming him now, reality itself demanding payment for his violation of its laws. But the anchor was weakening, microscopic fractures spreading through its impossible metal as the rig tore from the wall. All Might thought of Midoriya one last time, of the successor who would carry One for All forward in a kinder world than this one. He thought of all his students, of every person he'd saved, of every smile he'd protected. His own smile returned to his skeletal face one final time, blood-stained and terrible and beautiful. The chain snapped, the anchor rig tearing free completely. 400 saved, everyone, no one left behind, just like a real hero. His body gave out completely, falling backward as consciousness finally abandoned him. The last thing he felt was arms catching him, the freed captives he'd saved now returning the favor, pulling their broken savior back toward the portal entrance, back toward the PDF, forces waiting to receive them, back toward a galaxy that had just witnessed what true heroism looked like when stripped of all pretense and calculation. Archon Zelith watched from the courtyard as his prize slipped away. 400 captives and their impossibly determined rescuer pulled back through the webway portal before the generators shut down. The Archon's perfect raid had become a complete disaster. His warriors decimated, his captives freed, and his reputation damaged. But as he retreated to his remaining ships, he couldn't help but feel something approaching respect for the Golden Warrior. In a galaxy defined by cruelty and calculation, he'd just witnessed something genuinely unprecedented. Someone who valued every life equally, who refused to accept acceptable losses, who would literally die before abandoning people in need. It was insane. It was tactically absurd. It was the most terrifying thing Zelith had seen in 3 centuries of raiding across the galaxy. Because if that philosophy could spread, if others began to believe that heroism mattered more than survival, the Dark Eldar's entire predatory existence would face opposition of a kind they'd never encountered. Back in the courtyard, Imperial Medici teams swarmed over All Might's broken body as the freed captives knelt around him. 400 souls praying to the God Emperor for this stranger's survival. All Might woke to the sound of prayer. Thousands of voices chanting in unison, their words flowing through the walls of the Medici facility like a living thing. His eyes opened slowly, his vision blurry and unfocused. Tech priests moved around his bed, their mechadendrites adjusting monitoring equipment that beeped steadily. He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it, pain lancing through his skeletal body from a dozen sources. His old wound felt like liquid fire in his side, and his lungs burned with each breath. "Stay still," a Medici officer ordered, pressing him gently back onto the bed. "You've been unconscious for 3 days. Your body suffered catastrophic damage. By all medical logic, you should be dead. The poison alone should have killed you within minutes. The dimensional corridor exposure should have torn your molecular structure apart. The physical trauma from sustained combat in your weakened state should have stopped your heart." The officer's voice carried confusion mixed with awe. Yet here you are, alive and healing at a rate that defies every principle of Imperial medicine. All Might's throat was too dry to speak. The Medici offered him water, supporting his head as he drank. The liquid felt like heaven sliding down his throat. "The captives," he finally managed, his voice barely a whisper. "Did they make it back? All 400? His sunken eyes fixed on the officer with desperate intensity. Everything he'd sacrificed, every wound he'd endured, all of it meant nothing if he'd failed to save them all. "All 432, the Medici corrected. "You freed everyone, the 400 from the initial raids plus the 32 children from the orphanage. 0 fatalities among the civilians. 7 PDF casualties, all minor wounds already treated and returned to duty." The officer's voice carried wonder. In 30 years of treating combat casualties on Virtus Prime, I've never seen results like this. Never. Most rescue operations against Dark Eldar result in 70–80% losses. You achieved 100% success. The words should have brought relief, but All Might only felt exhaustion settling deeper into his bones. His body was healing. That much was true, but slowly. Much slower than normal. The poison and dimensional corridor exposure had done something to his cellular structure, introducing damage that even One for All's enhanced recovery couldn't easily repair. He might never return to full strength, might never transform again. And there was still the question of how to get home, back to his students who needed him. Commissar Vestra entered the medical chamber, her uniform somehow remaining immaculate despite 3 days of coordinated defense operations. She studied All Might's skeletal form with an expression he couldn't quite read. Not disgust or fear like he'd seen from civilians, but something more complex. Respect, perhaps, mixed with confusion and a hint of anger. She dismissed the medici staff with a gesture, waiting until they were alone before speaking. "You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most foolish," she said finally, her voice lacking its usual harsh edge. "Possibly both simultaneously. The tactical officers have been analyzing your rescue operation. They've concluded it was impossible. The odds of success were calculated at 0.03%, yet you succeeded anyway through sheer stubborn refusal to accept reality." She moved closer to his bed, her augmented eye whirring as it scanned his vital signs. "You nearly died. You did die, technically. Your heart stopped twice during extraction. The medici had to restart it both times." "But everyone made it out," All Might replied, his smile returning despite his weakness. "That's all that matters. Every single person I went in to save came home safely. No one left behind. That's what heroes do, Commissar. We don't calculate acceptable losses. We save everyone or we die trying." He coughed, bringing up blood that the medici had warned him to expect for several more days. "Though I'll admit I pushed harder than I probably should have. My students back home would be furious with me for being so reckless." Vestra's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Those people you saved, they've been holding vigil outside this facility for 3 days. 432 civilians plus their families plus citizens who heard what you did. The crowd has grown to nearly 5,000. They're calling you a living saint, claiming the Emperor himself sent you to protect Virtus Prime." Her voice carried warning. "This is dangerous. The Imperium has very specific doctrines regarding saints and divine intervention. The ecclesiarchy will want to examine you. The Inquisition will certainly take interest." "I'm not a saint," All Might said firmly. "I'm just a teacher who happened to have power and chose to use it to help people. Nothing divine about it. Just determination and a refusal to give up." He tried to sit up again, succeeding this time despite the pain. "How long until I can leave? I need to figure out how to get back to my own universe. My students need me. There's a young man I promised to train, a successor who's counting on me to guide him." Before Vestra could answer, the door opened to admit Governor Markham and a figure All Might hadn't seen before. A man in ornate robes bearing the symbol of the Inquisition. The newcomer was younger than All Might expected, perhaps in his 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. He carried himself with quiet authority, the kind that didn't need to announce itself loudly. This was someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "I am Inquisitor Kalen of the Ordo Xenos," the man introduced himself, his voice measured and precise. "I've been observing events on Virtus Prime with great interest. Your arrival, your capabilities, your philosophy, all of it presents unprecedented complications for the Imperium." He pulled a chair close to All Might's bed, settling into it with casual confidence. "I've reviewed all available data, combat footage, medici reports, testimony from 432 witnesses. The conclusions are inescapable. You possess power that places you among the most formidable warriors in the Imperium, comparable to our greatest war assets, yet you claim no allegiance to the Imperium, no connection to the warp, no genetic enhancement beyond what you call one for all. All Might listened carefully, recognizing an evaluation when he heard one. This Inquisitor was deciding his fate, determining whether he represented an asset or a threat. The wrong words here could mean execution or worse. But lying wasn't in his nature, and he'd never been good at political maneuvering. So he spoke truthfully, as he always had. I'm from another universe entirely, one where people like me exist to protect others. We call ourselves heroes. We use our powers not for conquest or domination, but to maintain peace and help those who can't help themselves. A noble philosophy, Kalen acknowledged, but practically meaningless in this reality. The Imperium maintains humanity's survival through strict hierarchy, unwavering faith, and calculated sacrifice. Your individualistic heroism threatens that structure. Already we're receiving reports of citizens questioning orders, demanding their PDF regiments adopt your tactics, speaking of you as though you possess authority exceeding their planetary governors. His eyes never left All Might's face. You've destabilized centuries of careful indoctrination in just 3 days. That makes you incredibly dangerous. I'm not trying to overthrow anything, All Might protested, his voice strengthening despite his pain. I just saved people who needed saving. I didn't ask them to worship me or follow me. I don't want authority over anyone. I just want to help where I can and then find my way home. He met Kalen's gaze directly. But I won't apologize for saving lives. I won't accept that calculating acceptable losses is the only way. There has to be room for something better, even in a universe as dark as this one. Kalen leaned back in his chair, studying All Might with renewed interest. That's precisely what concerns me. Not malice or corruption, but hope. Hope is a weapon, All Might. It can inspire incredible courage and achievement. But it can also blind people to necessary cruelties, make them unwilling to accept sacrifices that ensure long-term survival. He gestured toward the window where the crowd's prayers could still be heard. Those people out there now believe that perfect victories are possible, that every life can be saved if someone just tries hard enough. What happens when they encounter situations where that's genuinely impossible? When the choice is between sacrificing 1,000 or losing 1,000,000? Then you make the hard choice, All Might replied. But you make it after exhausting every other option, not as your first response. The problem I've seen here isn't that people accept necessary sacrifice. It's that they've started treating all sacrifice as necessary. Stopped looking for alternatives because looking takes effort and time. His skeletal hand gripped the bedsheet with surprising strength. I'm not naive. I've faced impossible situations before. I've had to make terrible choices, but I made them only after I'd tried everything else, after I'd pushed myself beyond every limit looking for better solutions. Governor Markham had remained silent during this exchange, but now he spoke up. Inquisitor, I've ruled Virtus Prime for 23 years. I've overseen 7 previous Dark Eldar raids. Total casualties from those 7 raids combined, 4,817 civilians killed or captured. This raid, the 8th, should have been the worst. They committed more resources, stayed longer, attacked more locations. Yet because of this man, casualties were 0 except those freed from captivity. His voice carried conviction. Whatever disruption his presence causes to Imperial doctrine, the results speak for themselves. Kalen nodded slowly. The results are indeed remarkable, which is why I'm here with a proposition rather than an execution order. He stood, pacing the small medical chamber. All Might, you said you want to return home. I believe I've found a way to make that possible. The warp storm that brought you here left residual dimensional instabilities. With the proper equipment and knowledge, we could generate a stable portal back to your reality. The Mechanicus has already begun studying the phenomenon. Hope surged in All Might's chest, stronger than any pain his body currently endured. You can send me home? Back to my students, my world? The possibility seemed too good to be true, and his hero's instinct warned him there had to be a catch. Nothing in this universe came without cost. What do you want in return? 3 weeks of your time, Kalen replied. A Tyranid hive fleet is approaching this sector. Our system monitors and astropaths detected the first signs 3 days ago, though the shadow in the warp makes readings uncertain. It's a splinter fleet, broken off from a larger tendril, but still more than Virtus Prime's defenses can handle alone. Reinforcements are en route but won't arrive for 26 days. We need someone who can hold the line until help arrives, someone who can inspire the population to fight with everything they have. His eyes locked onto All Might's. I'm asking you to stay. Not forever, not as a permanent servant of the Imperium. Just 3 weeks. Save this world one more time, and I'll personally ensure you're returned home safely. The request hit All Might like a physical blow. 3 more weeks in this nightmarish universe. 3 more weeks away from his students, from Midoriya, who was still learning to master One for All. But he looked at Governor Markham's hopeful expression, thought about the 5,000 civilians praying outside, remembered the 400 people he'd pulled from the webway. How many more would die if the Tyranids arrived before Imperial reinforcements? How many children would be consumed by alien horrors while he chose his own desires over their survival? I can't promise I'll be at full strength, All Might said finally. The poison and dimensional corridor exposure damaged me in ways I don't fully understand. I might not be able to transform at all, might be stuck in this skeletal form. He coughed, bringing up more blood. And 3 weeks is a long time. The Tyranids, what are they exactly? I need to understand what I'm facing. Vestra answered, her voice grim. Xenos, unlike anything you've encountered, they're a hive-minded species that consumes all biological matter in their path. No negotiation, no mercy, no individual thought. They exist only to feed and multiply. A single Tyranid organism might not be dangerous, but they attack in numbers that blot out the sun. Millions, billions, waves of claws and teeth and biological weapons designed by alien intelligence beyond human comprehension. She pulled up a hololithic display showing grainy footage of previous Tyranid attacks. They don't capture or enslave. They devour everything. They'll consume every living thing on Virtus Prime, down to the bacteria in the soil if we can't stop them. All Might watched the footage, seeing swarms of alien creatures overwhelming Imperial defenses through sheer numbers. He saw space marines in power armor torn apart by masses of smaller organisms. He saw titans, massive war machines the size of buildings, dragged down by bioships larger than Imperial cruisers. This wasn't like fighting the Dark Eldar, where his speed and strength gave clear advantage. This was fighting an endless tide that cared nothing for its own casualties. How many people live on Virtus Prime? He asked quietly. 3 billion, Markham replied. Mostly agricultural workers and their families. Simple people who've never known anything but farming and prayer. If the Tyranids breach our defenses before reinforcements arrive, they'll all die. Every single one. His voice shook slightly. I've sent evacuation requests to the Administratum, but they've been denied. Virtus Prime produces 15% of the sector's food supply. Evacuating the population would mean abandoning the agricultural infrastructure, which would cause famines on dozens of other worlds. We're ordered to defend in place or die trying. 3 billion lives. The number was incomprehensible, larger than anything All Might had ever been responsible for protecting. His body was damaged, possibly permanently. His power was unreliable at best. He'd be fighting an enemy designed by evolution and alien intelligence to be the perfect killing machine. Every tactical calculation said this was impossible, that one person couldn't make a difference against a force of such magnitude. But he'd made his entire career out of proving the impossible was merely difficult. I'll stay, All Might said, his smile returning to his skeletal face. 3 weeks. I'll teach your people everything I know about heroism, about pushing beyond limits, about refusing to accept defeat, and when the Tyranids come, I'll stand with them. Not because I'm obligated, not because you're paying me, but because people need help and I'm here to give it. He extended his skeletal hand to Kalen. After 3 weeks, you'll send me home as promised. No tricks, no complications. Deal? Kalen shook his hand, his grip firm. You have my word as an inquisitor. 3 weeks, then home. He released All Might's hand and moved toward the door. The Medici estimate you'll be mobile within 2 days. Use that time to rest and recover. After that, Governor Markham will coordinate your training programs with local PDF forces. Commissar Vestra will serve as your liaison to Imperial command structures. He paused at the threshold. One more thing. Your philosophy about saving everyone, about refusing to calculate acceptable losses, I want you to teach it openly. Let's see what happens when an entire world embraces that mindset. After Kalen departed, Vestra remained behind, her expression troubled. You realize he's conducting an experiment, don't you? He wants to see whether your heroic idealism can survive contact with Tyranid invasion, whether hope can exist as a viable strategy in this galaxy, or whether it's merely naive delusion doomed to fail when tested by reality. Her augmented eye whirred as it focused on his face. What if you can't save everyone this time? What if the numbers are too large, the enemy too overwhelming? What happens to all those people's faith when they watch you fail? Then I'll fail having tried everything, All Might replied simply. I'd rather attempt the impossible and fall short than never try at all. And who knows? Maybe I'll surprise you. Maybe hope is stronger than you think. He looked toward the window where 5,000 voices continued their vigil. These people haven't had real hope in generations. You've told them sacrifice is necessary. So often they've started believing suffering is noble. But what if they're capable of more? What if given the right inspiration they could achieve things your calculations say are impossible? Vestra was silent for a long moment, her expression cycling through emotions she'd spent decades suppressing. Finally she spoke, her voice softer than All Might had ever heard it. I shot a soldier last week for retreating from a lost position. Standard commissariat protocol, maintaining discipline through fear. He was 19 years old, had joined the PDF 6 months ago. I put my bolt pistol to his head and pulled the trigger without hesitation because that's what the Imperium requires. She met his eyes. If your philosophy had existed here, if that soldier had believed retreat was acceptable when saving lives, would I have been wrong to execute him? The question carried weight beyond its words. All Might recognized it as a genuine inquiry, not a rhetorical trap. Vestra was struggling with contradictions his presence had introduced, questioning doctrines she'd followed without doubt for 30 years. He chose his words carefully, understanding they mattered more than any physical battle he'd fought on this world. I can't judge choices made in contexts I don't fully understand, he said slowly. But I can tell you what I believe. Fear is a terrible foundation for discipline. People who fight because they're afraid of their own leaders will never be as strong as people who fight because they believe in something worth protecting. His smile was gentle despite his skeletal appearance. That soldier didn't need execution. He needed inspiration. He needed someone to show him that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite fear. You took away a life that could have been transformed into something heroic. Tears appeared in Vestra's natural eye, the first time All Might had seen her display such vulnerability. The Imperium doesn't have room for such transformations. We need soldiers who obey instantly, who accept orders without question, who'll die when commanded without hesitation. Your way seems kinder, but kindness is a luxury we can't afford when fighting for species survival. Her voice broke slightly. Isn't it? Maybe, All Might acknowledged. Or maybe you've convinced yourselves kindness is impossible because it's harder than cruelty. Maybe treating people as disposable assets has become habit rather than necessity. He extended his skeletal hand toward her. Help me prove there's another way. 3 weeks isn't much time, but it's enough to plant seeds. Enough to show people what they're capable of when someone believes in them. Vestra stared at his offered hand for several seconds before finally taking it. Her grip was strong, the grip of someone deciding to take a chance on something that might destroy everything she'd built her life around. "I'll help you," she said quietly. "Not because I believe you'll succeed, but because I want to see what happens when someone tries. Even if it ends in failure, at least we'll know for certain whether your philosophy has any place in this universe." The next 2 days passed in a blur of activity. All Might recovered faster than the Medicae predicted, his one-for-all enhanced healing compensating somewhat for the damage he'd sustained. He remained in his skeletal form, unable to transform even briefly, but his mind was sharp, and his voice was strong. Governor Markham arranged for him to address the population, setting up broadcast equipment that would carry his words across the entire planet. When All Might finally stood before the cameras, 5,000 civilians packed the plaza outside while 3 billion more watched from their homes and workplaces. He looked at those gathered faces, seeing fear and hope mixed in equal measure. These were people who'd lived their entire lives under threat, who'd watched loved ones stolen by raiders or consumed by alien horrors. They'd been taught that suffering was inevitable, that individual lives mattered little compared to collective survival. Now they waited to hear what this strange skeletal warrior would tell them. "My name is All Might," he began, his voice carrying across the plaza with surprising strength. "I come from another universe, one very different from yours. But despite those differences, I recognize something familiar in your eyes. It's the look people get when they've forgotten how to hope, when they've accepted that tomorrow will be just as terrible as today." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I'm here to tell you that acceptance is wrong. Tomorrow can be better. You can be better. Not because you're weak now, but because you've never been shown what you're truly capable of achieving." He told them about his world, about heroes who protected not from duty or fear, but from genuine desire to help others. He spoke of his students, young people learning that power came with responsibility rather than privilege. He explained one for all, the power passed from person to person, each generation building on the last, growing stronger through shared purpose rather than individual ambition. His words were simple, direct, free of the complex religious imagery that usually characterized imperial speeches. "In 3 weeks, an enemy is coming to your world," All Might continued. "The Tyranids will arrive seeking to consume everything you've built, everyone you love. Your leaders tell me the odds are against us, that we face overwhelming numbers, that many of you will likely die before reinforcements arrive." His skeletal hand clenched into a fist. "I've heard those odds. I've reviewed the tactical assessments. And I'm here to tell you that odds mean nothing compared to determination. Numbers are irrelevant when people refuse to give up." The crowd began to stir, his words sparking something that had been dormant in them for generations. Vestra watched from the sidelines, her hand no longer resting on her bolt pistol, her expression thoughtful rather than suspicious. Governor Markham stood beside her, tears streaming down his face as he listened to concepts he'd never imagined could be spoken aloud in Imperial space. "I'm not a space marine or a saint or anything divine," All Might said, his voice building to a crescendo. "I'm just a teacher who refuses to calculate acceptable losses. And over the next 3 weeks, I'm going to teach you everything I know about being a hero, about pushing past your limits, about saving everyone rather than accepting that some must be sacrificed, about becoming the kind of people who make the impossible look easy through sheer determination." His smile blazed across his skeletal face. "Because I am here. And that means we're going to save every single person on this planet, all 3 billion of you. No exceptions, no acceptable losses, everyone. The plaza erupted, not with the disciplined chanting of imperial loyalty, but with genuine enthusiasm, with hope that had been buried so long people had forgotten what it felt like. They cheered not because they were ordered to, but because someone had finally told them they mattered individually, that their lives had value beyond their contribution to collective survival. Commissar Vestra found herself cheering alongside them, 30 years of conditioning cracking like ice in spring thaw. Over the following weeks, All Might transformed Virtus Prime in ways no one had thought possible. He held daily training sessions, not teaching combat techniques, but teaching philosophy. He spoke to PDF regiments about the responsibility of power, about protecting those weaker rather than expending them. He visited factories and farms, telling workers their labor had meaning beyond mere duty. He held special sessions for children, teaching them that heroes could come from anywhere, that power wasn't required for heroism, only the choice to help others. His skeletal form never transformed back to its powerful state, his body remaining damaged from his webway rescue. But his presence transformed the planet anyway, not through physical strength, but through the power of his conviction. People began calling themselves heroes, adopting his philosophy, looking for ways to help each other rather than merely surviving another day. Crime rates dropped as citizens took responsibility for their communities. Production increased as workers found meaning in their labor. The PDF forces trained with new intensity, not from fear of punishment, but from desire to protect what they'd learned to value. Commissar Vestra became his most devoted student, setting aside her bolt pistol in favor of actually training soldiers rather than executing them. She discovered that inspiration worked better than terror, that people fought harder when defending something they loved rather than fleeing something they feared. Governor Markham implemented reforms based on All Might's teachings, establishing the first Hero Academy in Imperial space, an institution dedicated to teaching courage, compassion, and personal responsibility. On the 20th day, the first signs appeared at the system's edge. System monitors detected massive biosigns translating into real space, though the shadow in the warp made detailed readings difficult. What they could see was terrifying enough. Dozens of bioships, living vessels propelled by eldritch means, their hulls pulsing with alien hunger. The swarm mind reached out, touching the planetary consciousness, expecting to find terror and despair. Instead, it found something unprecedented in its millennia of conquest: determination. All Might stood on the walls of the planetary defense fortress, his skeletal form wrapped in a simple cloak against the wind. Beside him stood Commissar Vestra, Governor Markham, and representatives of every PDF regiment on the planet. Behind them, 3 billion civilians prepared for the fight of their lives, not with resignation but with fierce resolve. "They're bigger than I expected," All Might admitted, watching the bioships descend through the atmosphere. "More numerous, too. This is going to be difficult." His smile never wavered. "But difficult isn't impossible. Remember what I taught you. Every life matters. Every person saved is a victory. We don't calculate acceptable losses." Vestra checked her lasgun, its charge pack full and ready. "We'll hold them," she said with absolute conviction. "Until reinforcements arrive, until our last breath, we'll hold them. Because you taught us that's what heroes do." She met his eyes. "Thank you for showing us what we could be, even if just for 3 weeks." The first wave of tyrannid organisms hit the defensive walls like a living tsunami, and All Might smiled his brightest smile yet. Not because victory was certain, but because 3 billion people stood ready to fight for each other rather than merely survive. He'd taught them to be heroes, and heroes never gave up. The battle for Virtus Prime had begun, and for the first time in 10,000 years, hope stood alongside humanity against the darkness.